Hey folks, this is the NLE Ninja, and today I want to show you how to use NLE Ninja Edits Volume 3. But before I do that, I first want to thank all my subscribers for the views and kind words over the last 2 years. After I did my first tutorial back in 2011 and got encouragement to do more, I never looked back. This project file is my token of appreciation, and I want to share tips for you to utilize it to its best potential. This project comes with 7 unique transitions and 4 effects templates, as well as some presets. They all contain the assets necessary to work properly and can be changed out at a moment's notice. I've also made sure to provide versions in 720p and 1080p as your project may demand one or the other, and I don't want you to make the sacrifice of quality for the sake of that. I'm going to give you a brief breakdown of how to get your footage into the placeholders I provided, as well as modify settings I have in place. I'll be using the 720p versions of each transition and effect, but anything I do for those will work for the 1080p versions. Let's get started. I'm going to start with the diagonal pass-by transition. This transition and the 4 flare transition have similar structures in that their respective transitions are inside of nested sequences. I have 2 placeholders on track 1 that can be replaced with some footage. I'm going to load some footage into my source monitor now. I'm going to highlight my first placeholder in the timeline, and I'm going to go to Clip, Replace Clip from Source Monitor. What this does is called a replace edit, where we could swap out one clip for another but maintain the same parameters. I'll load up a second clip into my source monitor. I'm going to highlight my second placeholder to repeat the process. Let me highlight all my items and do a quick render to see the final result. And here's what the final result looks like. We've swapped out our placeholders with footage and now have access to this transition. These steps I've taken here will work with the 4 flare transition as well. Also, if you're not in love with the colors of the diagonal pass-by transition, you can go into the nested sequence and change any of the parameters. Let's move on to the 2 track matte based transitions, FRACTAL Zigzag and X-Bar Transition. These transitions work based on the animated matte that the incoming clip uses. So if I go into my FRACTAL Zigzag sequence, you'll see that I have 2 placeholders overlapping each other. The second placeholder has a matte on track 3 and an overlay on track 4. I'm going to highlight my first placeholder and load a new clip into my source monitor. This time, I'll use my custom keyboard shortcut F12 to do a replace edit. I'm going to highlight the first half of the second placeholder on track 2. For my second placeholder, I'll need to do 2 replace edits as my placeholder is split in 2. I'm going to highlight the first half of this placeholder. I'll load some new footage into my source monitor and do another replace edit. I'll move to the last frame of this part of the placeholder. I'm going to press the F key to do a match frame. This time, I'm going to highlight the second half of the placeholder, and I'm going to do a match frame replace edit by pressing F13. What this does is allow our second clip to be animated by the matte and overlay and then play forward seamlessly. I'm going to highlight all my items and do a quick render to show you the result. Here's what the final result looks like. The steps taken here will also work with the X-bar transition. With these transitions, you can speed up or slow down the mattes and overlays to your liking. You can also change the color by using the color balance HLS filter or tint filter, like so. The Spaces transition is a simple push transition with a small widget at the bottom of the screen. It's meant to simulate the Mac OS going from desktop to desktop. There are two versions of this transition. For Mac users, you can download a trial of Film Impact's Transition Pack 1 and use the Impact Push version, or use a version that has an adjustment layer and the native push slide transition. Like the other transitions I've explained, all you have to do is highlight the placeholder and do a replace edit to swap your placeholders with your footage to take full advantage of the animation. Here's what the final result looks like. Let's take a look at the media buffer transition and the Alt-Tab transition. These transitions are unique in the fact that they both use freeze frames during their animations. Let's break down how to use them. With the media buffer transition, it has placeholders like the other transitions mentioned before. However, to make it work properly, it needs a freeze frame. There are two ways to create freeze frames with Premiere Pro, so I'll show you a way that doesn't ask you to export and re-import a still. Let's first do a replace edit of our first and second placeholders. Let's move the playhead over the last frame of the first placeholder and do a match frame. I'm going to highlight the placeholder with assets on top of it. I'm going to highlight the placeholder that has assets on top of it. Next, I'm going to press F13 to do a replace edit match frame. I'll right click and select frame hold. Make sure it's set to hold on endpoint and no other settings are checked. I'm going to highlight all my assets and do a quick render. We get a seamless animation from one clip to the next, and we don't have to export a still. The Alt-Tab transition works in the same way, but with more freeze frames. In the Alt-Tab transition, let's change our outgoing and incoming clip placeholders with some footage. Next, select the placeholder on track 1 underneath the nested sequence. Let's move the playhead on the last frame of our outgoing clip and do a match frame. Let's do a replace edit match frame. Right click and select frame hold. With its default settings, hit OK. We now have our freeze frame in place for that portion, so we can go into our nested sequence. In this sequence, we'll have to load our footage into the source monitor and do replace edits followed by frame holds on the endpoint like we did in the main sequence. For the first and fourth placeholder in this sequence, you'll want to have it on the frame you set for the outgoing and incoming clip. Let me change the placeholders right now. After you've changed the placeholders, you can edit any of the other settings in the other nested sequences to your heart's content. Let's go back to the main sequence and see what the final result looks like. The iPad overlay is relatively simple to swap footage out of. First thing you want to do is highlight your first placeholder on track 1. Let's load some footage into our source monitor. With the timeline active, I'm going to press F12 to perform a replace edit. Next, I'm going to right click and select frame hold and hit OK. I'm going to highlight my second placeholder and press F12 again to do a replace edit. And here's what the final result looks like. You have the ability to change the text and other assets to your choosing. The CW overlay is easy to change as well. Let's highlight our placeholder on track 1. Let's load some footage into our source monitor. And with the timeline active, let's do a replace edit on our background placeholder. I'm going to open the nested sequence and do another replace edit with the same footage for the placeholder in there. Let's take a look at what the final result looks like. You can change the color of the frame to any color that you want. You could also change the crop filter on the footage to affect its settings as well. If you want, you could also add text to the frame underneath your footage. In the main sequence, if you want to change the values for the keyframes, go right ahead. Chaos Overdrive is an interesting effect as it requires the same clip at different points of time. For the first placeholder, I would recommend doing a replace edit at the beginning of your clip. Next, let's move our playhead over the last frame of our first placeholder to do a match frame. Let's highlight the placeholders that are stacked on top of each other. I'm going to press F13 to do a replace edit match frame so our footage will inherit the filters and settings of these placeholders. Finally, let's move our playhead to the last frame of the second placeholders. I'm going to press the F key to do a match frame. I'm going to highlight our last placeholder and press F13 to do a match frame replace edit. Let's see what the final result looks like. As you can see, the Chaos Overdrive will work seamlessly across your footage if you take these steps. The final effect is one of my favorites of the volume, and that is the ribbon wall video display. With this effect, you can place 2 videos inside of matted displays, and you also get an animated title to enhance it as well. You could also change the background to something different if you choose. As I've shown before, you could go into the nested sequences containing the video displays and perform replace edits to get your footage into the displays. Let me do that right now. One thing to note about these video displays, if you need to, you could add an offset or transform to shift the image so that it's more centered. If you want to change the color of the ribbon wall element, you could do so by using the color balance HLS filter, tint filter, invert filter, or any other image control filter you have access to. If the matte provided isn't doing it for you, you could also use a frame or a different matte altogether. The possibilities are endless. If you need to edit the title, you can go to the title nest and double click the title here. I'm going to make it say NLE Ninja. Since we have two title nests, one on top and one for the reflection, it will automatically be reflected in this title nest right here. Let's go to our main sequence. I'm going to render this real quick so I can show you what the final result looks like. As you can see, I may need to make some changes in regards to how my text is animating, but the animation's still there, so as long as I shift any keyframes or what have you, the possibilities are endless. The presets are easy to install. They're a collection of picture-in-picture effects, gradients, ramps, and matte remover presets. All you have to do is go to your effects browser and right-click on the presets folder. I'm going to select Import Presets. And then I'm going to navigate to the folder that has my NLE Ninja presets. Hit Open, and they'll appear in here. With the picture-in-picture presets, I have presets for getting your images or video at each corner of the screen. For the gradients, I have a 4-color gradient preset you could use in 1080p or 720p. A matte remover is based on a tutorial I did for Audio Micro that helps to remove any footage that has a black or white background when blend modes aren't doing the trick. And ramps are used as starter backgrounds for any project you may have and you need a nice gradient or a ramp like this, so you can use these ramps on any project you have. Thanks for watching this overview tutorial for NLE Ninja Edits Volume 3. I hope you find this file useful for projects you may have down the line. In my next tutorial, I'll show you how to import this project file and select only effects or transitions you need in a new project. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment on this video or the promo video, and I'll respond as soon as possible. This March, I plan to have more NLE Ninja tutorials, as well as tutorials for companies such as Rampant Media Design, Luca Visual Effects, and more. I'm the NLE Ninja, and as always, I ask you to stay creative. Thanks for watching.